got to let one thing. I can't let one thing go, Mr. Joyce. But I find it ironic that the New Zealanders, who could never pride themselves on paying a decent wage compared to Australian conditions, still are struggling, because if they were that great, we'd still have our canneries here. So it wasn't. I know you can't, but I will.
New Zealand is a very important market for us, Senator, and we still have a huge operation in New Zealand, and I think it continues to be very important for the group.
No, I fully understand, but it certainly wasn't wages were a problem for Air New Zealand, and that's the case. Okay, because and my last one, but it would be interesting to compare the fuel costs on the 747s.
Yes.
And I understand the A380s, you've put that argument very succinctly, but the fuel costs on the 747s as compared to the 787s and the 777s, obviously you would have that homework too, because as much as we acknowledge the high Aussie dollar is hurting us,
yeah,
but I think the fuel usage figures would be very helpful.
I can give you some indication, and we'll get you more. The A380 has a 10% fuel efficiency over 10% fuel efficiency over the 747s. The 787 has a 20% fuel efficiency over existing technology. So that's the size of the type of efficiency we're going to be getting with these new aircraft. And we're getting it compared to the 747 and to the 330s that are operating with them, but I'll get you the comparison against the 777s.
I think one of the things probably worth saying, Senator, is if you look at our competitors, there's a number of competitors operating similar aircraft types to Qantas who are making money flying into Australia with the same aircraft type. So I think you've got to look more broadly. I think aircraft and fuel costs are an easy one to point to, but when you see competitors operating the same aircraft with the same fuel costs, profitable, you've got to then look beyond that. And there's many things in this country that make the Qantas cost base much, much higher. And we've touched on a few of them. Alan talked about efficiency, but you don't have to look very far to see the same sort of things that manufacturing firms are struggling with: payroll tax, depreciation schedules, which are very different from foreign competitors. Some of our international competitors have government-sponsored debt, so their cost of capital is substantially cheaper. There's a range of factors across the business that do affect the international competitiveness, not to mention the geography of not having a hub operation where you've got passengers moving in and out like you would be if you're in the middle of Asia.
Okay. Now, I'm going to, thank you. Senator Ludlam, you don't have any questions?
I'll come in later.
Okay. I know Senator Gallagher, do you have any questions before I go to Senator Heffernan? Okay. Senator Heffernan.
Reluctantly, you've come to me.
No, I have an agreement with the leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. Just to clear up a couple of things we've been talking about recently, the leases, I mean, there is a yarn around the committee that there's some sort of dodgy lease arrangement. You know, some ex-employees of Qantas have got a lease arrangement.
No, you haven't.
Yeah, but others have said it. And I'd like you, not today, to clarify that. I mean, the allegation is that there's some shonky lease deal which enables former employees to get acquitted. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
I'm not, Senator, but I can tell you absolutely there is no lease deals with former employees.
Company,
I think there was a company that some former employees had a stake in. That this may be referring to, and those lease deals were locked in before they had a stake in that company. They were completely at market value. There was no difference in the lease rentals that were being performed against that company, the Qantas, and there's no shoddy arrangements taking place.
Thank you very much. Just want to clarify that because they love to live on rumours. The lease arrangements that you have, Mr. Joyce, are they in what currency?
What happens with a lease arrangement, Senator, is that usually aircraft are purchased in US dollars. Aircraft, when we purchase them or lease them, have a US dollar denominated, and then our Treasury Department locks them in to Australian dollars at the time in which
they hedge the lease?
The leases, the purchase of aircraft and the leases. So some of our aircraft were bought when the Australian dollar was 50 or 60 cents. Yeah. Some of them are now being bought at $1. And the lease is the same, but they are locked in to whatever the exchange rate is at the time to minimise our risk to exchange rate fluctuations.
So, and with your fuel, do you hedge your fuel?
We do hedge our fuel. We have what's called a tailing hedge policy, where we do give ourselves certainty. We try not to speculate on the market, where we don't speculate on the market. We go out there and hedge fuel to give us time to adapt and to change. And our hedging has been very good in the past and has allowed Qantas to adapt a higher fuel price. And for example, Senator, last year the fuel price was over $100, but Qantas did benefit from the hedging. Our customers benefited from the hedging in place. And it's only this year that we've had to put significant increases in the fuel charges into place because our hedging is running out. And our hedging is very low given current fuel prices. And we're seeing our fuel bill, as I said, in the first half of this financial year go up by $450 million. We now are spending $2.2 billion a half on fuel. They are significant increases, which unfortunately is the reason why we had to increase our fuel surcharges.
And just on past questions, you read out a long list generously to Senator Sterle of airlines that you compete against.
Yes.
It would be fair to say it's a long history of airlines in recent years going belly up, wouldn't it?
There is, Senator, and even this year already, we're only 1 month into the year, and we have Malov, the Hungarian airline, that's gone bankrupt after 66 years. Kingfisher is having issues with meeting its payment requirements with IATA, and Spanair, a big Spanish carrier, has gone bankrupt already. So we're seeing failures even accelerating at the moment. And as you point out, Senator, some amazing brands over the years have disappeared. Pan Am, TWA, Ansett. Every year there seems to be significant failures, and when we go into a significant financial crisis which we've had, we've seen even more failures. And some other airlines have had to go into bankruptcy for restructuring. American Airlines have used Chapter 11 restructuring in the States now to try and fix their business so that they can be competitive. JAL, another big partner of Qantas, have just left bankruptcy protection to restructure their business because they were losing significant amounts of money, were going bankrupt, and they needed the Japanese government to bail them out for that to be fixed.
So I want to actually come to the bill because it seems the Air Navigation Civil Aviation Amendment Aircraft Crew Bill will require Australian airlines and their subsidiaries to provide paying conditions for overseas space flight and crew operating on their flights that are no less favourable than directly employed by the Australian airlines. So to put that into context, and with the indulgence of the Chairman, I'd just like to paint a picture of where we've been and where we're going and ask the question whether you've modelled this. I mean, in recent years we've gone 47 cents Australian to the US dollar.
Yes.
We signed a free trade agreement with the United States in 2005 when we were at 67 cents. When we enacted the bill in the next year, 2006, we were at 70 cents.
Yes.
In that process, God love them, we did away with 5% and 15% subsidies, tariffs.
Yes.
But we've now imposed on ourselves a 50% currency tariff.
Yes.
And you've got to compete against that.
Yes.
Now, you have pointed to the fact, and this is about a sort of a fortress, this bill is about a fortress mentality,
yes.
Fortress Australia mentality, and I can't see, it's bad enough owning an airline, making profits nearly as bad as a farm. Not quite. But look, just to put this into context, I was in Korea on a free trade, a trade mission some years ago. And the woman that served the dinner in one of those international hotels, the cost of the meal was a month's wages to the waitress.
Yes.
That's what we're up against.
Yes.
So to deny that somehow there is a global market, farmers have got to wear the consequences of that. The car industry has got their hand out to the government because of this.
I'm just waiting for the question.
These shoes were $30 because I came from my work boots, went down to R.M. Williams and they were $230. This.
Sorry, he's not getting this right.
So where were they made, Senator Heffernan?
This
Where
is
were your
sort of-
shoes made? Why didn't you buy the R.M.
The
Williams?
banks are moving jobs to India. Telstra's moving jobs to India. At the same time, we are saying through this bill, but son, you've got to wear the consequences here in Australia. Well, obviously we don't want you to go out of business. So have you modelled what would happen to the airline if in fact this was enacted?
We have done it in part, Senator, but can I say I couldn't agree more with you. We are facing an open aviation market that's probably one of the most open markets in the world. Any airline can establish, as an example, a domestic airline in Australia and have it 100% foreign owned. That cannot take place in any other country. Even the Americans, the home of capitalism, have a restriction of 25% on any foreign ownership of any single airline there. We are setting up airlines in Asia where in some cases we can't own any more than 33% or 30% of the airlines because of the restrictions associated with them. In Europe, the same restrictions take place. In the international markets, we've had an open access policy for some time. And Emirates operate well over 70 services here per week. This is the biggest market that they operate anywhere in the world in terms of the frequency and the capacity that they've added to the routes. So we have a very open market, and it comes benefits with having that. But it does mean that Australian companies have to be able to be flexible and adaptable to compete with it. And if we assume that we can lock Australian companies into the terms and practices that have been there for decades before that open market access was granted and before those changes that you outlined, Senator, occurred, then we were just signing the death warrant of those businesses.
I'm going to come to where this is going to take us. I read recently, and Senator Sterr will be interested in this, in the mining industry, some requirements put on by Chinese companies in buying our iron ore is that the Australian infrastructure be built with Chinese steel to Chinese specifications.
Yes.
I don't hear a whole lot of backlash on how you manage that. I don't know how you manage that. If the mining industry, has to cop it.
Yeah, Senator, I think it's fair to say that these restrictions, as we said, would be unique to Qantas as an Australian company, and would put restrictions on us that other Australian companies wouldn't have to meet. And it seems crazy in one of the most competitive industries in the world. As you said, the total profitability of the aviation industry last year worldwide was $6 billion, less than an Australian bank. And that's the whole industry. And this year it's going to be half of that. So to make a profit in this highly competitive industry is doing exceptionally well. And to have restrictions on Qantas and not to be able to compete on a level playing field with the rest of the world's aviation is crazy, and it will condemn Qantas to failure.
I mean, obviously, most Australians treasure Qantas, and we want to see it survive, but at the same time, the pilots, want to be flying pilots. But did you say the average hours for Qantas was $500 500 hours a year?
500 hours a year is the utilisation for long-haul pilots.
And so what is the... That's flying hours.
That's flying hours.
Yep. So what is the top wage for a Qantas pilot?
A380 captains would be paid up to $500,000.
So that's $1,000 an hour.
Yep.
Flying time for the captain.
What was that figure, sorry?
$500,000 is the top of the range.
Yeah, that's the top of the range. So what's the middle cut? What's the...
around 300, I'll check, but I think it's around 380, yeah. I think what we usually say for a 380, the captain get paid.
So that's it's better than the average lawyer, put it that way.
Yeah, so roughly...
Sorry, old mate.
As a politician.
Well, roughly...
Anyhow, that's just to put that into perspective. I mean, what we're up against, and I guess this committee's got to realise that half the world is technically insolvent. The US is technically insolvent.
Yes.
They've got $3 trillion of toxic debt. They've got just moving from 14 to 16 trillion of public debt to GDP. They're going to be at 100% of GDP shortly. Japan is at 200% of GDP. England, without the forward estimates, is 100% of GDP. So what that says to me, sorry, Senator Xenophon, but you've got to get this into perspective. That says to me that our terms of trade with our currency is going to be against us for a long time. I mean, the US, the only way they're going to scramble out of their mess is to use inflation to devalue their debt.
Yep.
I mean, so we're up against it. So with all that in mind, I've got some structured questions I want to ask about the effect of the bill rather than all the stuff we've heard about this morning.